It was one of those cold, windy evenings when the sky looked heavy with rain, and the small town seemed even quieter than usual. The streets were empty except for the sound of the wind pushing old leaves across the road. Inside a tiny, worn-out cottage at the edge of the town, a young woman sat near a small heater that barely gave out any warmth. Her name was Lena. She was 23, with tired eyes that still held a soft kind of hope. Life hadn't been kind to her, but she had learned to keep going no matter what. She lived alone in that little cottage, a place that once belonged to her grandmother. It was old, with creaky floors and walls that sighed when the wind blew, but to Lena it was still home. She had been working at a small diner in town for nearly 3 years. It wasn't much, but it helped her survive. Every morning, she woke up before the sun rose, walked half an hour to the diner and worked long hours, serving coffee, wiping tables, and listening to the same stories from regular customers. When her shift ended, she walked back home, sometimes too tired to even cook herself dinner. But she never complained. Lena had learned early that complaining didn't make life easier. Her parents had passed away when she was 16, leaving her to take care of herself. She had no siblings, no close relatives, and very few friends. Most people in town barely noticed her. Still, she carried herself with quiet kindness, always smiling, always willing to help when someone needed it. That evening, as she sat by the heater sipping weak tea, she looked over her bill spread across the small table. The rent was due, electricity was overdue again, and she still needed to pay off the loan she had taken for her grandmother's medical expenses years ago. She sighed softly, rubbing her hands together for warmth. Outside, the wind began to howl louder, and soon the first drops of rain started tapping against the window. She got up to close it when she noticed something unusual: 2 figures standing near her gate. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her because of the rain. But when she squinted, she could see clearly. A man and a small boy, both soaked from head to toe, standing under a dim streetlight. Her heart skipped a beat. Strangers didn't usually stop by her house, especially not at this hour. She hesitated for a moment, unsure what to do. But then she saw the boy. He looked no older than 6 or 7, shivering in his wet clothes, holding tightly to the man's hand. Without thinking twice, Lena grabbed an umbrella and hurried outside. The rain was coming down harder now, and the wind pushed against her as she ran to the gate. "Are you all right?" she called out, her voice almost lost in the wind. The man looked up. He seemed surprised to see her, as if he hadn't expected anyone to come out. His face was calm but tired, and his dark coat was soaked through. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said in a low, steady voice. "Our car broke down just down the road. There's no signal, and I can't reach a tow truck. We've been walking for a while trying to find shelter." Lena looked at the boy again. His lips were trembling, and his small hands clutched a toy car. The sight made her heart ache. "Please come inside," she said quickly. "You'll catch a cold out here." The man hesitated for a moment. He looked like someone not used to asking for help, someone with pride. But when he looked down at his son, he nodded softly. "Thank you," he said. Lena led them inside, closing the door behind them. The small room instantly felt warmer compared to the storm outside. She handed them both towels and motioned toward the heater. "Sit here, warm up," she said gently. The little boy gave her a shy smile, and she smiled back. He had soft brown hair and big eyes that looked curious but cautious. "What's your name?" she asked kindly. "Noah," he whispered, almost too softly to hear. "That's a nice name," she said, kneeling beside him. "You must be freezing. I'll get you some dry clothes." She went to her room and came back with an old sweater and a small blanket. The clothes were a little big, but they were dry and warm. She handed them to the boy, and he smiled again before thanking her in a small voice. The man sat quietly near the heater, his eyes following her every move. He seemed thoughtful, maybe even uneasy. When she handed him a towel, he nodded gratefully but didn't say much. "I'll make some tea," Lena said. "It's not much, but it'll help." A few minutes later, the smell of warm tea filled the room. She poured 3 cups and placed them on the table. The man looked at her for a moment, then finally spoke. "You didn't have to do all this," he said quietly. "We can leave once the rain slows down." Lena shook her head. "You can stay until the storm passes. The roads here flood easily. It's not safe." He looked at her as if studying her face for a reason behind her kindness. There was something about her tone, steady, caring, and completely sincere, that made it impossible to argue. He simply nodded, Noah sat beside his father, sipping the tea carefully. "It's really good," he said, smiling shyly. Lena laughed softly. "I'm glad you like it." The house fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the sound of the rain hitting the windows. After a while, Lena spoke again. "You're not from around here, are you?" The man shook his head. "No, we were driving through town on our way to the city." "I didn't expect the car to give out like that," Lena nodded. "This road does that. Old cars, bad luck, and no repair shop nearby." He gave a small smile. "Seems like you know a lot about bad luck." She chuckled, a little embarrassed. "You could say that." Something about the way he said it wasn't mocking, it was gentle, almost understanding. Still, Lena avoided his eyes and began cleaning up the table. After a few minutes, Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, wrapped in the blanket she gave him. The man stood up and covered his son more carefully. The way he looked at the boy, protective, patient, made Lena notice a softness in him that didn't match his serious appearance. "You can take the spare room," she said quietly. "It's small, but at least it's warm." He looked at her with mild surprise. "We can sleep here on the couch." "You've already done more than enough." "Please," she said, insisting gently. "It's just for one night." After a pause, he nodded. "All right. Thank you. For everything." Lena smiled faintly. "You're welcome." Later that night, when she went to her own room, she found herself thinking about them. The man and his son, two strangers who had suddenly appeared in her quiet life. There was something mysterious about him. Something that didn't quite fit. His clothes, though wet, were expensive. His watch looked costly. And his voice carried a kind of calm authority, like someone used to being in control. She wondered what his story was, but she didn't ask. Everyone had their secrets, and she knew better than to pry. Before going to sleep, she looked out the window once more. The storm was still raging, the wind bending the trees, but inside her little house, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel quite so alone. The next morning, Lena woke up early. The rain had stopped and soft sunlight filtered through the curtains. She went to the kitchen to make breakfast. The smell of toast and coffee filled the air. When she turned around, she saw the man standing by the door, dressed in the clothes she had helped dry by the heater. "Good morning," he said. His voice was calm, deep, and polite. "Good morning," she replied with a smile. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," he said. "My son's still asleep. He hasn't rested properly in days." Lena nodded. "Then let him sleep a little more. Breakfast will be ready soon." He looked at her for a moment as if trying to read something in her eyes. "You're very kind," he said finally. "I just did what anyone would do," she said lightly. "Not everyone would," he replied softly. There was a short silence. Then, as if remembering something, he reached into his coat pocket and took out his phone. "There's still no signal here," he said, glancing at it. "Once it comes back, I'll call for help. But before that..." He hesitated, then met her eyes. "May I have your full name?" Lena blinked, surprised. "My name?" He nodded. "Yes, I'd like to thank you properly once we get back to the city." "Oh, that's not necessary," she said, slightly flustered. "It is to me," he said simply. "Please." She hesitated for a moment, then smiled and gave him her name. He repeated it softly, as if memorizing it. A little later, after breakfast, he packed their things and woke Noah. The boy smiled sleepily at Lena, hugging his toy car. "Thank you for helping us," he said. Lena knelt and smiled at him. "Take care of your dad, all right?" "I will," he said proudly. When they stepped outside, the sky was clear again. The man shook her hand gently. "You really have no idea how much this meant," he said. "I won't forget it." Then they walked down the road, father and son disappearing around the corner. Lena stood there for a moment watching them go. She didn't know who they were, where they were going, or if she'd ever see them again. But something deep inside her told her that night had changed something. Not just for them, but for her too. She turned back toward her little house, her heart a little warmer than before. Life was still hard, still uncertain. But now, it felt a little less lonely. Days passed quietly after the night Lena gave shelter to the man and his little boy. The storm had gone, and the skies were back to their soft blue color. Everything looked normal again, but inside Lena's heart something had changed. She didn't know what it was exactly, but ever since that night she felt a strange emptiness. Maybe it was the silence of the house after hearing a child's laughter. Maybe it was the thought of two strangers she had helped, but didn't even know much about. Each evening, after coming home from the diner, she found herself glancing at the road where they had disappeared that morning. She kept wondering if they made it home safely, if the man had fixed his car, or if the little boy still remembered her. It was a small thing, but it stayed in her mind. One evening, as she cleaned tables at the diner, her co-worker, Nora, looked at her curiously. "You've been smiling to yourself a lot lately," she said, wiping a glass. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Lena laughed softly. "Nothing much. Just thinking." "Thinking about who?" Nora teased. Lena shook her head. "No one, just someone I met." That night, when she returned home, she noticed a small envelope slipped under her door. It had no name, no address, just her name written neatly on the front. She frowned, opened it carefully, and found a small note inside. It read, "Thank you again for that night. You may not realize it, but your kindness meant more than words can say. I hope to return the favor someday." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew it was from him, the man who had shown up at her door with his son. A smile crept onto her face. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her drawer. For some reason, it made her feel at peace. Weeks turned into months, and Lena's life continued as usual. She worked hard, paid her bills, and tried her best to save whatever little she could. But deep down, she still wished for something more, a change. A break, a chance to build a better life. Then, one morning, something unexpected happened. As she sat in the diner during a slow hour, the bell above the door chimed. A woman in a neat black suit walked in, holding a small folder. She looked out of place in the small-town diner, her polished shoes clicking softly against the floor. She approached the counter and asked, "Excuse me, are you Lena?" Lena blinked, surprised. "Yes, that's me." The woman smiled politely and handed her an envelope. "This is for you. I was asked to deliver it personally." "From who?" Lena asked, puzzled. "I'm not sure," the woman replied. "But I was told it's important." Before Lena could ask anything else, the woman gave a brief nod and left. Lena stared at the envelope in her hands. It was plain white, sealed neatly, with her name written in elegant handwriting. Her heart beat faster as she carefully tore it open. Inside was a letter printed on heavy paper. The words looked formal, and at the top was a name she had never seen before, Harrison Global Holdings. She frowned, reading the first few lines aloud under her breath. "Dear Ms. Lena, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for an interview for the position of special assistant. The interview will take place this Friday at our corporate office in the city." She blinked in disbelief. Harrison Global Holdings was one of the biggest companies in the country. She had heard the name on TV, in magazines, even from customers at the diner who liked to gossip about rich business owners. But why her? She had never applied for a job there. She didn't even have a proper resume. Her manager noticed her standing frozen at the counter and asked, "Everything all right, Lena?" She quickly folded the letter and smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, I think so." That whole day she couldn't focus. The words in that letter kept repeating in her mind. Selected for an interview. That night she barely slept. She kept wondering if it was some mistake or maybe a scam. But the letter looked too official to be fake. It even had a contact number and address printed clearly. By morning she made up her mind. She would go. Even if it turned out to be nothing, she had nothing to lose. Friday came. Lena took the earliest bus to the city, carrying her small handbag and the letter folded neatly inside. The city was loud and fast, nothing like her quiet town. She felt nervous and out of place as she walked through the tall glass buildings. When she finally reached the address written in the letter, she stopped in awe. The building was massive, shining in the sunlight with big silver letters on the front, Harrison Global Holdings. Inside, everything looked expensive. People in suits walked briskly through the marble hallways, carrying files and talking on phones. Lena's hands trembled slightly as she approached the front desk. "Good morning," said the receptionist with a polite smile. "How may I help you?" I'm here for an interview," Lena said, handing over the letter. The receptionist checked the paper and nodded. "Yes, Ms. Lena, you're expected. Please take the elevator to the top floor." Lena's heart pounded as she stepped into the elevator. The doors closed and the floor numbers slowly climbed higher. She clutched her bag tightly, wondering why a huge company like this would want to interview her. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped out into a quiet, elegant hallway. A tall man in a suit greeted her. "Ms. Lena?" This way, please. He led her into a large office with tall windows overlooking the city, and then she froze. Standing by the window was a familiar figure, the man she had helped that rainy night. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her breath caught in her throat. He turned slowly, and when their eyes met, a small, knowing smile appeared on his face. "Good morning, Lena," he said calmly. "I'm glad you came." She blinked, speechless. "It's you," she whispered. He nodded. "It's me." Her thoughts spun in confusion. "You're the CEO?" He smiled faintly. "Ethan Harrison, CEO of Harrison Global Holdings." Lena's mouth fell open slightly. She took a small step back as if trying to process it. I don't understand," she said quietly. "You were just walking in the rain that night." "With your son?" He nodded again. "Yes, that was me, but why?" she asked softly. He paused, his eyes calm and thoughtful. "Sometimes I need to get away from all this," he said, glancing around the luxurious office. "Away from meetings, cameras, expectations. That night I just wanted to spend some time with my son, away from the noise. The car broke down and fate led us to your door." Lena couldn't believe what she was hearing. "I had no idea." He smiled gently. "That's exactly what made it special." There was a moment of silence. Lena still stood there, unsure what to do with her hands or what to say. Finally she managed, "But why am I here?" Ethan walked over to his desk and picked up a folder. "Because I don't forget kindness," he said simply. "When I left your house that morning, I promised myself I'd find you again. You didn't know who I was, but you still helped me and my son without asking for anything. That kind of kindness is rare." He placed the folder on the desk and pushed it toward her. "I have a position available here. It's demanding, but it's honest work. You'll be my assistant if you're willing." Lena stared at him in disbelief. "Me, but I don't have experience. I've only ever worked at a diner." He smiled again. "I know. But I've seen how you handle people, how calm you are under pressure. I saw that in just one night. I believe you can learn the rest." Lena didn't know what to say. She felt her eyes sting a little with emotion. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I'm not sure I fit in a place like this." Ethan looked at her kindly. "You helped a stranger when you had every reason to turn him away. You have a good heart, Lena. That's something no degree or experience can replace." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city lights glittered behind him, and Lena felt as if the world had suddenly opened up wider than she ever imagined. After a long pause, she smiled nervously. "All right," she said softly. "I'll try." Ethan's expression warmed. "Good. I'll have my assistant handle the details. You can start next week." As she left his office, her heart was still racing. She could hardly believe what had just happened. A few months ago, she was barely managing to pay rent. Now she was being offered a job by one of the most powerful people in the city, all because of one small act of kindness. When she got home that evening, she stood outside her cottage for a long time, watching the sunset. Everything looked the same, the old wooden fence, the squeaky gate, the fading paint, but somehow, her world felt completely different. She walked inside and looked around her little house, the same one that had sheltered two strangers one stormy night. She remembered the boy's sleepy smile, the man's calm voice, the sound of rain tapping on the roof. It all made sense now. That night she sat by the window, holding the note he had left her weeks ago. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, "You really did keep your promise." The weeks after Lena received the offer from Harrison Global Holdings were a whirlwind of emotion, preparation, and self-doubt. Every day she woke up with a mixture of excitement and anxiety, wondering if she had made the right decision. The thought of working in a big corporate office surrounded by people who were highly trained and experienced made her feel small. Yet somewhere deep inside she knew this was a chance she could never ignore. Her small cottage felt different now. Every time she walked through the creaky wooden floors or opened the chipped cabinets in her kitchen, she felt like she was living between two worlds. One world was her quiet, familiar life, the life she had always known. The other world was waiting for her in the city, a world of polished floors, glass walls, and endless possibilities. She could feel the pull of both, and it left her feeling unsteady, yet strangely alive. The night before her first day, she barely slept. She arranged her few outfits neatly, pressed the simple dress she had decided to wear, and set out her shoes. She practiced how she would introduce herself, how she would answer questions, and even how to shake hands properly. Every time she thought about seeing him again, the man who had appeared at her doorstep that stormy night, her heart beat faster. There was a calm strength about him that made her feel both nervous and reassured at the same time. Finally, the morning came. The city was bustling when Lena arrived, filled with people hurrying to work, taxis honking, and the faint smell of street food and exhaust. She took a deep breath, clutching her bag tightly, and walked into the building that had seemed so overwhelming on her first visit. This time, though, it didn't feel as intimidating. She reminded herself that she was here because someone had seen something in her, a quality no amount of wealth or training could give. The receptionist guided her to the elevator, and she pressed the button for the top floor. As she waited, she watched her reflection in the shiny metal walls. She barely recognized herself. The tired, uncertain girl from the diner now looked determined, her shoulders squared, her eyes alert. It was strange how quickly life could demand change. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out into a quiet hallway. Before she could walk further, a familiar voice called her name. "Lena?" She turned to see him standing there. Ethan, dressed impeccably in a suit that seemed to fit him perfectly. His hair neatly combed and his eyes calm yet filled with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. "Good morning," he said, his tone as steady as ever. "I'm glad you're here." She nodded, almost unable to speak. "Good morning," she managed. "Follow me," he said, leading her through a maze of offices. She noticed how people paused and glanced at him with respect, whispering to one another. Yet when he spoke to her, it was different. There was no air of superiority, no hint of condescension, only a quiet expectation and trust that made her feel both honored and nervous. Finally, they reached a small office near the corner of the building. Ethan opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Inside there was a desk, a computer, and a few chairs. It wasn't a large space, but it had a warm, personal feel. "This will be your workspace," he said. "You'll be handling schedules, emails, and important documents. I'll also be involving you in some of the meetings once you're settled." Lena nodded, trying to appear confident even though her stomach was twisting with nerves. "I'll do my best," she said quietly. "I know you will," he replied. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight of trust that made her chest tighten. The first days were overwhelming. Lena had never used some of the software programs in the office before, and she struggled to keep up with the pace of the work. Emails flooded in constantly, phone calls came without warning, and the meetings she sat in on were filled with terms she barely understood. At first, she worried she had made a mistake. Maybe she wasn't cut out for this world at all. But then she remembered that rainy night. She remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when he thanked her, the little boy's shy smile and the trust he had shown by letting her into their lives. That memory became a quiet source of strength. If she could help strangers in the middle of a storm, surely she could learn to navigate a busy office. She started small. She organized his schedule meticulously, made sure no emails went unanswered, and even took the time to notice small details that others overlooked. For instance, she remembered when one of the senior managers preferred documents printed in a specific format, and she adjusted her work accordingly. Slowly, she began to notice that Ethan's trust in her wasn't misplaced. Ethan, for his part, didn't hover or micromanage. He allowed her to work at her own pace, offering guidance only when necessary. He noticed her strengths quietly, the way she could calm a tense situation, how she remembered details, and how she treated everyone in the office with respect. He didn't need to tell her she was doing well. She could see it in the way he looked at her, a subtle nod or a small smile of acknowledgement. One afternoon, a crisis hit the company. A major client had a problem, and everyone was scrambling to fix it. Lena had never dealt with such pressure before, but she remembered the calm she had felt that stormy night while helping a little boy and his father. She focused, prioritized tasks, sent out the right emails, and coordinated between teams. By the end of the day, the problem was resolved, and Ethan turned to her with a rare smile of approval. "You handled that well," he said, his voice calm but approving. I didn't have to step in once. Lena felt a swell of pride. Thank you, she said softly. You earned it, he replied. Days turned into weeks, and Lena began to find her rhythm. She started enjoying the work, not just because it was challenging, but because she felt she was growing in ways she had never imagined. Each day brought something new, an unexpected problem, a new task, or a lesson in patience and strategy. She learned to ask questions, to observe, and to trust her instincts. Evenings in the city were still lonely. Lena missed the quiet of her small cottage and the comforting routine of her old life. But she also realized that change was necessary for growth. She began to feel a sense of purpose she had never known, and the knowledge that her kindness had brought her here made her feel more confident. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan invited her to stay a few minutes after everyone left. He wanted to discuss an upcoming project that involved important clients. They sat in his office, the city lights glowing behind him, and talked about strategies, meetings, and planning. Lena noticed how calm and composed he was, even under pressure, and she realized how much she was learning simply by observing him. Lena, he said after a moment, you've adapted faster than I expected. She blushed slightly. I'm still learning, she admitted. You've learned more in these weeks than some do in years, he said. And more importantly, you haven't lost your perspective. You still notice things that others overlook, and you care about people. His words hit her in a way she hadn't anticipated. All her life she had been trying to survive, often feeling invisible. Now, someone powerful had noticed her not for what she lacked, but for the small kindnesses and qualities she thought went unnoticed. After leaving the office that night, Lena walked slowly through the streets of the city. She thought about how life could change in an instant, how a single decision, like letting a stranger and his son into her home, could alter the path of her life completely. She smiled to herself, thinking about Noah and how that little boy's sleepy smile had started it all. Back at her small apartment in the city, she unpacked her bag and set out her clothes for the next day. She paused for a moment, looking at the skyline outside her window. Everything was different now. The city, the office, her work. All of it was a new chapter in her life. And yet, she felt a deep connection to the life she had left behind, to the quiet town and the small cottage that had given her the courage to help strangers in the first place. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt that her life was not just about surviving. It was about learning, growing, and stepping into possibilities she had never dreamed of. And it all started with one small act of kindness on a stormy night, a night she would never forget. Weeks passed since Lena had started working at Harrison Global Holdings, and she was slowly beginning to feel comfortable in the fast-paced world of the city. The office no longer seemed intimidating, and she had developed a rhythm with her tasks. Her confidence grew as she realized that she could handle challenges she never imagined possible. But despite her success, there was always a lingering sense of curiosity about the man who had given her this opportunity, Ethan. She knew him as the calm, composed CEO, yet there was a part of him that remained mysterious, something she had only glimpsed on that rainy night when he and his son had arrived at her doorstep. One afternoon, as the office buzzed with its usual activity, Ethan called Lena into his office. He had a soft, serious look on his face, and Lena felt a flutter of nervousness. She wondered if she had made a mistake somewhere, or if something had gone wrong. She knocked lightly and stepped inside. Lena, Ethan began, motioning for her to sit. I wanted to talk to you about something important. She nodded, taking a seat across from him. Of course, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He leaned back in his chair and gave her a small, thoughtful smile. I know you've been doing exceptionally well here. Your work, your observations, the way you handle people. It's all been impressive. But there's something else I want you to understand about why you're here. Lena tilted her head, curious. Why I'm here? Yes, he said, his voice calm yet filled with weight. I didn't just bring you here because you showed competence. I brought you here because of something much more important, your character. You showed kindness, empathy, and courage when you had nothing to gain, and that's something that cannot be taught or bought. She blinked, feeling a mix of surprise and emotion. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, he replied. I want you to understand that your actions matter, Lena. They shape how people see the world and how you see yourself. You helped me and my son when I could have remained just another stranger. That's why I knew you were the right person for this role, even if you didn't have experience. The sincerity in his voice made her heart swell. She realized that she had never been appreciated like this before, not for her abilities alone, but for who she was. All her life she had been overlooked, her kindness often dismissed as ordinary. Yet here was someone powerful acknowledging her in a way that felt genuine and deep. I never thought my actions could make a difference, she admitted softly. They do, he said, leaning forward slightly. Sometimes we underestimate the impact of simple choices. You could have ignored us that night, but you didn't. That decision set a chain of events into motion that changed all our lives. Lena thought back to the stormy night, to Noah's small hands clutching a toy car, and to the way Ethan had carried himself with quiet patience. She realized how much courage it had taken for both of them to show vulnerability, and she understood that her choice to help had not been small at all. It had been meaningful. For the next few days, Lena noticed subtle changes in how Ethan interacted with her. He included her in more meetings, asked for her input on decisions, and even sought her advice on matters she had never expected to be involved in. She felt a growing sense of respect for him, not just as a CEO, but as a person who had chosen to remain humble despite his position. One evening, as they were finishing a long day at the office, Ethan asked Lena to stay behind. He wanted to show her something, a project he had been working on quietly. It was a program designed to provide support for families in need, offering financial assistance, education, and resources for children. Lena was amazed. She had seen glimpses of his work from the news, but this was something personal, something he had put his heart into. This is why I brought you here, he explained. I wanted someone who could understand the human side of things, someone who could connect with people, not just numbers or reports. I believe you can help me make this program even better. Lena felt a rush of emotion. She had spent so long struggling to make ends meet, and now she was in a position to help others in ways she had never imagined. I'll do my best, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I know you will, Ethan said, giving her a reassuring smile. And I trust you completely. That night, as Lena walked home, she thought about how far her life had come. From a small, quiet town to the bustling city, from struggling to survive to having the power to make a real difference. It all felt surreal. She remembered the nights she had spent worrying about bills, the days she had felt invisible, and the small moments of kindness she had shown without expecting anything in return. And now those moments had led her here. She also thought about Ethan, the man who had appeared at her doorstep that rainy night, and about Noah, the little boy whose smile had stayed with her. She realized that their presence in her life had been more than chance. It had been a turning point. In the following weeks, Lena worked closely with Ethan on the new program. She met with families, listened to their stories, and helped develop solutions that could truly make a difference. Each day she felt a growing sense of purpose and fulfillment. She realized that helping others, just as she had been helped, was more rewarding than anything she had ever imagined. One afternoon, as they were reviewing progress reports, Ethan paused and looked at her thoughtfully. Lena, he said, I want you to know that this is just the beginning. Your role here is not just about work. It's about making a real impact, about helping people in ways that matter. And I want you to be a part of that every step of the way. Lena felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had never expected to hear words like that in her life. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, he replied gently. Just continue being who you are. That's enough. From that day on, Lena's life took on a new rhythm. She worked hard, learned quickly, and began to feel a deep sense of connection to her work and the people she was helping. She also grew closer to Ethan, not in a romantic sense, but in a way that made her feel supported, understood, and valued. He became a mentor, a guide, and a quiet source of inspiration in her life. One evening, after a particularly long day, Lena walked through the city streets, thinking about everything that had happened. She realized that life could change in the most unexpected ways, and that the smallest acts of kindness could lead to the greatest opportunities. She remembered the stormy night, the little boy's sleepy smile, and the man who had trusted her enough to let her help them, and she understood that her life would never be the same again. Lena knew that this chapter of her life was just beginning, and that the future held possibilities she had never dared to dream of. She felt a sense of peace and purpose that she had never known, and she vowed to continue living with the same kindness and courage that had brought her here. Every day, she reminded herself that life was full of unexpected turns, and that the choices she made, even the smallest ones, had the power to change everything. And as she walked home that night, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars, she felt a quiet confidence that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Months passed since Lena had joined Harrison Global Holdings, and her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The timid, uncertain girl who had once struggled to pay rent and feed herself now moved through the office with quiet confidence. She had learned quickly, grown stronger, and earned the respect of her colleagues. Her days were full, sometimes exhausting, but she no longer felt lost or invisible. Her bond with Ethan had deepened, built on mutual trust, respect, and understanding. He continued to challenge her, guiding her through difficult decisions and teaching her to see problems from different perspectives. She admired his dedication, not just to the company, but to the people around him, especially his son Noah. Even after months, Lena would sometimes catch herself smiling at the memory of that first rainy night, thinking about how one small act of kindness had changed everything. One morning, Lena arrived at the office to find Ethan waiting by the elevator, looking unusually serious. His calm demeanor was there, but there was a hint of something different in his expression, a quiet urgency that made her curious. "Good morning," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Good morning, Lena," he replied. "Can we talk for a moment before the day starts?" She nodded and followed him to his office. Once inside, he gestured for her to sit. "I wanted to discuss something important," he began. "The company is growing rapidly, and we're looking at expanding our outreach program significantly. I want you to take the lead on one of these new initiatives." Lena's eyes widened. "Me, lead?" she asked, her voice a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Yes," Ethan said, his tone calm but firm. "I've watched you handle challenges, think creatively, and connect with people in ways that others cannot. I trust you completely to take this on." She felt a surge of emotion. All those months of hard work, of learning and adapting, had led to this moment. I'll do my best," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know you will," he replied with a small smile. "And remember, you won't be alone. You'll have the team's support, and I'll be here if you need guidance. But I want you to know that this is your opportunity to make a real impact." Over the next few weeks, Lena threw herself into the project. She met with families, listened to their stories, and helped design programs that could genuinely improve their lives. She coordinated with multiple teams, navigated bureaucratic challenges, and learned to make tough decisions. Every day brought new lessons, and every success filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. One afternoon, as she was reviewing the latest reports, Ethan walked in with Noah trailing behind him. The little boy ran straight to her, his eyes lighting up as he held out a small drawing. "For you," he said shyly. Lena knelt and accepted it. It was a simple drawing of a house with a bright sun and two figures standing outside, one tall and one small. She smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. "It's beautiful, Noah," she said softly. "Thank you." Ethan watched silently, a small smile playing on his lips. "He hasn't stopped talking about you," he said. Lena laughed quietly. "I guess he remembers that night well." "Yes," Ethan said, his gaze thoughtful. "And I do too." That evening, Lena walked home through the quiet city streets. She thought about everything that had happened. The stormy night, the unexpected letter, the first day at the office, and the countless challenges she had overcome since then. She realized that life had a way of rewarding small acts of kindness in ways she had never expected. Helping Ethan and Noah had seemed like a simple thing at the time, but it had led her to opportunities, friendships, and experiences that she could never have imagined. As she approached her small apartment, her phone rang. It was Ethan. "Hi, Lena," he said warmly.
"I wanted to invite you to dinner tomorrow."
"Just the three of us. Nothing formal, just us." Lena felt her heart skip a beat. "Dinner? That sounds nice," she replied softly. I think it's time we celebrated all that you've accomplished, he said gently, and I want Noah to enjoy a quiet evening with someone he's come to care about. The next evening, Lena arrived at Ethan's home, a spacious but warmly decorated apartment that reflected both sophistication and comfort. Noah ran to greet her, hugging her tightly. Ethan smiled at the scene, his calm presence radiating reassurance. They ate dinner together, talking, laughing, and sharing stories from their lives. For the first time, Lena felt completely at ease with both of them, as if she had known them far longer than a few months. Noah's laughter filled the room, and Ethan's quiet, steady presence reminded her of the importance of patience and understanding. After dinner, they sat on the couch, and Ethan turned to Lena. I want you to know something, he said softly. You have brought a light into our lives that we didn't know was missing. Your kindness, patience, and courage have changed not only your life but ours as well. Lena felt a lump in her throat. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't need to say anything, he replied. Just continue being yourself. That's more than enough. In that moment, Lena realized the full impact of her journey. Life had tested her, challenged her, and often left her feeling alone. But it had also shown her the power of compassion, the importance of trust, and the value of taking risks for others. One simple choice, a decision to help two strangers on a rainy night, had set her on a path she never could have imagined. Weeks turned into months, and Lena continued to grow both personally and professionally. She became a mentor to new employees, helping them navigate the challenges of the office and teaching them the importance of empathy and kindness. She worked closely with Ethan to expand the company's outreach programs, touching countless lives along the way. Despite her busy schedule, she never forgot the small town she had come from, the quiet cottage and the simple joys of her early life. She often thought about her grandmother and the lessons she had taught her, lessons about resilience, kindness, and the value of helping others without expecting anything in return. One evening, as she sat by the window of her apartment, looking out at the city lights, Lena reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the stormy night, the little boy's sleepy smile, and the man who had trusted her enough to let her help them. She realized that life was full of unexpected turns, and that the smallest acts of kindness could lead to the greatest opportunities. Her phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. Thank you for everything you do. You're part of this family now. Lena smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she had the strength, courage, and kindness to face whatever came next. As she looked out at the city, she whispered to herself, sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness open doors we never knew existed. And with that thought, Lena felt a deep sense of peace, purpose, and hope. She had discovered that life's true treasures were not wealth or fame, but the connections we make, the compassion we show, and the courage to take chances when it matters most. Her story had begun with a rainy night and a small act of generosity, and it had led her to a life filled with opportunity, love, and fulfillment. And as she closed her eyes that night, she knew that no matter what challenges came her way, she would always carry the lessons of kindness and courage with her, lessons that had transformed her life forever.